You were told the Black Kettle kitchen saved the city, an act of unprecedented charity by a reclusive philanthropist, feeding a starving populace during the Great Panic of '93. They never told you what the soup was made of. It wasn't bone or bread. The core ingredient was memory. Before we taste this broth, understand the nature of this meal. This channel does not serve history. We reveal the recipe. We show you the secret ingredients of power and the true cost of the comfort the world enjoys. If you are content with the meal you have been given, turn away now. But if you have ever felt that the feasts of the few are seasoned with the famines of the many, then subscribe. Show us you are not afraid to know what you are truly consuming. This was not charity. This was the most profound and elegant form of cannibalism ever devised. A vast alchemical engine designed to strip the life experiences, the joys, and the sorrows from the desperate, and concentrate them into a single, potent elixir for a hidden clientele. Our story begins in the city of Argentus, 1893, a city of gods and ghosts, of sprawling mansions and crowded, lightless tenements. The panic has frozen the arteries of commerce. The factories are silent, the people are starving, and in the bleakest squares of the city's poorest districts, a miracle appears. The Argentus Benevolent Society erects a series of massive, black iron kettles. From them day and night, they serve a thick, rich, and impossibly nourishing soup, free to all who would stand in line. It tastes of 1,000 forgotten things, a childhood meal, a lover's promise, a moment of triumph. It is irresistible, and for every soul it saves from starvation, it takes a small, silent payment they never know they have made. The orchestrator of this grand, terrible feast was a man who called himself the Steward. He appeared in the city as if from nowhere, a man of indeterminate age with pale, soft hands and a face that was unnervingly placid. He never raised his voice. He never showed emotion. His eyes, the color of still, deep water, seemed to absorb the light around them, reflecting nothing back. He was a man without a scent, a void in the city's sensory chaos. He moved with a quiet, frictionless efficiency, his untraceable wealth securing city permits, bribing inspectors, and silencing any inconvenient questions before they could be fully formed. His chief operator was a woman known only as the matron. She was the one who presided over the kettles themselves. A stout, silent figure with a face like a weathered stone, her true genius was in her senses. It was said she could smell a forgotten memory on a person's skin, that her hands, as she doled out the soup, could feel the texture of a person's history. She never spoke to the people in line. She simply observed them, her gaze lingering on those whose faces were etched with the deepest grief, the most vibrant joys, the most profound losses. She was not a cook, she was a connoisseur. The heart of the operation was not the public kettles, but a vast, windowless building in the city's abandoned industrial quarter, a former hospice that had been bought and retrofitted by the steward. He called it the Grand Refectory. The construction was overseen by silent, foreign engineers. They installed a labyrinth of gleaming copper pipes that hummed with a low, constant energy. They built ventilation systems so powerful that no scent of cooking, no matter how potent, ever escaped the building's walls. And at the center of it all, they installed the mother kettle, a monolithic cauldron of a strange, non-reactive black meteoric iron, large enough to hold 1,000 gallons, heated by a silent, smokeless alchemical fire. To lend his charity a veneer of scientific legitimacy, the steward sought a collaborator. He found the perfect man in Dr. Eris Thorne, a brilliant but controversial neurologist who had been professionally ostracized for his theories on memory as a biochemical residue. Thorne was obsessed with the idea that memories were not just ethereal thoughts, but tangible physical impressions left upon the brain. The steward did not offer Thorne money. He offered him an impossible question. He invited the doctor to a private tasting of the broth, a vintage so potent it was never served to the public. "Doctor," the steward said, his voice a soft murmur, as Thorne tasted the soup and felt a sudden, inexplicable wave of victorious joy from a battle he had never fought. "You believe memory is a residue. I propose it is a soluble essence. What if grief, true love, profound loss? What if they could not only be extracted, but tasted? What if they could be metabolized?" The proposition was a siren song to Thorne's scientific soul. It was the grand, unifying theory he had been searching for his entire life. The moral implications were a distant, academic concern. The opportunity to observe, to document, to prove his wildest theories was irresistible. His journal from that night reveals a mind already captured. December 7, 1893. I have met a man who is either the greatest charlatan of the age or the Newton of a new and terrifying branch of human science. He calls it psychic-gastronomy. The steward speaks of memory not as a phenomenon, but as an ingredient. He proposes an experiment of breathtaking audacity to prove that the human life experience can be distilled, concentrated, and consumed. The potential for a new form of therapy is staggering. To literally feed a man courage, to give a grieving widow a dose of another's joy. The moral qualms are a luxury we cannot afford in the face of such a discovery. I have been granted full access to the refectory. My work begins tomorrow. I feel I am standing on the precipice of a new world. The Black Kettle kitchens became the city's salvation and its secret sickness. The soup was a miracle. A single bowl could sustain a man for a full day. It was thick, savory, and left the eater with a profound sense of warmth and well-being. But with every meal, a small, imperceptible price was paid. A carpenter who had stood in the soup line would find he could no longer remember his first love's face. A laundress would forget the melody of a lullaby her mother had sung to her. A retired soldier, once haunted by the horrors of war, would find his traumatic memories blessedly gone, but with them, the memory of his comrades' bravery and his own youthful courage. The city was being fed, but its collective soul was being slowly and methodically hollowed out, one forgotten memory at a time. The process was an elegant, terrible cycle. The matron, presiding over the public kettles, would identify those with the most potent histories, the deeply grieving, the fiercely loving, the profoundly traumatized. These individuals would be discreetly marked. Later, they would be approached by agents of the benevolent society with an offer, a permanent job at the Grand Refectory, with guaranteed food and shelter. To a starving person, it was a golden ticket they could not refuse. These chosen few became the donors. They were not harmed physically. They were housed in comfortable, clean dormitories within the refectory. Their only duty was to sit for an hour each day in what were called the meditation chambers. These were small, quiet rooms, each containing a single, comfortable chair and a complex apparatus of polished brass and copper helmets that were lowered over the donor's head. Dr. Thorne was told these were for neurological monitoring. In reality, they were extraction devices. Using a combination of low-frequency sound and pulsating magnetic fields, the helmets would stimulate the memory centers of the brain, causing the donors to vividly relive their most powerful life experiences. As they did, a fine, shimmering, vaporous essence would be drawn from them, a psychic steam that was then condensed into a shimmering, silvery liquid. This liquid was the raw ingredient. It was pure, distilled memory. Dr. Thorne, in his sealed laboratory, was given samples of this essence to study. His journal entries become a feverish catalog of a new and monstrous periodic table of the human soul. February 16, 1894. Sample 734, extracted from a widow whose husband died at sea. The essence, when analyzed spectroscopically, shows a unique resonant frequency. When a single drop is introduced to the base broth, it imparts a flavor of profound oceanic grief, a taste of salt and loss that is almost unbearably beautiful. The potential is limitless. We can craft symphonies of flavor. A soup that tastes of a first kiss, a broth that holds the memory of a hero's death. This raw essence was then piped to the mother kettle. Here, under the steward's personal supervision, it was alchemically stabilized and blended, with different vintages of memory being combined to create the final product. The most potent, undiluted essences were never served to the public. They were decanted into small, lead-lined vials and stored in a deep, cold vault. This was the true purpose of the operation. The public soup kitchen was merely the farm. The real product was a luxury good for a hidden clientele. The first person to sense the true nature of the transaction was not a scientist or a detective. He was a blind musician named Finn. His other senses, sharpened by a lifetime of darkness, could perceive things others could not. He stood in the soup line not for himself, but for his ailing sister. As he approached the kettle, he could smell it. Beneath the aroma of herbs and meat, he could smell the faint, ghostly scent of 1,000 different lives. He could smell joy, grief, and terror, all simmering together. When the matron ladled the soup into his bowl, her hand brushed his. In that fleeting contact, he felt it. A wave of profound, crushing sorrow that was not his own washed over him, the grief of 100 strangers. He recoiled as if burned. He did not eat the soup. He took it back to his small attic room. He dipped his fingers in the broth and let them dry. He then did the only thing he could. He began to play his violin, attempting to translate the terrible, silent story he had felt and smelled into a sound the world could hear. He began to compose the Black Kettle Lament, a song that would become the anthem of the city's secret sorrow. The Black Kettle Lament became a ghost in the city's alleys. Finn, the blind musician, played it on street corners in the poorest districts. It was a strange, haunting melody, filled with discordant notes of sorrow and flashes of a joy that was painful in its intensity. It was the taste of the soup, turned into sound. Those who had eaten from the kettles heard the song and felt a strange, nameless echo in the hollowed-out parts of their souls. They would stop and listen, a single tear rolling down a placid cheek, a feeling of a memory they could no longer name stirring within them. The song was a psychic tuning fork, resonating with their loss. The steward and his organization were not deaf to this new, dissonant music. His agents reported on the strange, melancholic effect the blind musician's song was having. The steward understood the danger immediately. Finn's music was a counter-frequency. It was reminding the flock of what they had lost, reawakening the phantom limb of their own history. But the true threat came from a different quarter. The steward's real clientele, the hidden consumers of his potent memory essences, were growing bolder. A secret society of jaded aristocrats and decadent industrialists who called themselves the Gastronomes had become his primary customers. They were connoisseurs of experience, men and women so bored with their own lives that they now sought sensation by consuming the lives of others. The steward would host private, clandestine tastings in the opulent mansions of Argentus. Here, he would serve his purest vintages, a single clear consommé that held the distilled essence of a soldier's dying moments on a battlefield, a dark, rich broth that contained the concentrated joy of a dozen wedding nights, a chilled, bitter soup that tasted of a poet's final, desperate act of creation. The gastronomes would consume these essences and experience the emotions as their own, a brief, powerful, and addictive escape from their own ennui. One of these gastronomes was a man named Lord Harrington Finch, the very same railroad baron who had funded the Crow foundling homes decades earlier. Now an old man, he had moved on from seeking obedient workers to seeking a more refined form of control. He was the steward's most ambitious client. He was not content with merely tasting the memories of others. He wanted to use them. He commissioned the steward for a unique and terrible blend. He wanted an essence that contained the distilled memories of loyalty, sacrifice, and fanatical devotion from 100 different soldiers. He wasn't planning a dinner party. He was planning to dose the water supply of his own private security force to create an army of men whose loyalty was not earned, but consumed. This is the turning point, the moment a system of quiet, parasitic consumption evolves into an active tool of domination, the moment the feast becomes a weapon. If you understand the terrible potential of this dark communion, if you see how the stolen essence of the masses can be used to forge the chains of their own oppression, then make your presence known. Hit the like button. Subscribe. The final course is about to be served. Dr. Eris Thorne in his laboratory was now a high priest of this new science, but he was also its prisoner. He had become addicted to the essences himself, secretly tasting his samples, experiencing flashes of lives more vibrant than his own. His scientific detachment had dissolved. But when the steward ordered him to create the loyalty tincture for Lord Finch, a line was crossed. This was no longer therapy. It was mind control. The last vestiges of his medical ethics rebelled. Began to subtly sabotage the process. He could not stop the extraction, but he could alter the formula. He started secretly adding a corrupting agent to the blend he was preparing for Finch, a powerful, resonant memory of betrayal, extracted from a woman who had been jilted at the altar. He theorized that the two opposing concepts, absolute loyalty and absolute betrayal, would create a volatile, unstable, and dangerously unpredictable psychic compound. He did not know what it would do. He only knew it would not be the perfect tool of control Lord Finch was paying for. It would be a poison. The night of Lord Finch's private investiture for his security force was a grand, secret affair held at his country estate. The loyalty tincture, a clear, odorless liquid, was decanted into a magnificent silver punch bowl. The guards, promised a special bonus and a celebratory toast, drank eagerly. Dr. Thorne was present. A guest of honor, his face a pale mask of scientific anxiety. The steward stood at Lord Finch's side, a placid, silent observer. At first, the effect was exactly as Finch had hoped. The guards stood taller, their faces filled with a look of fierce, unwavering devotion to their master. Finch smiled, a cruel, triumphant curl of his lips. He had his army. Then Thorne's corrupting agent began to take effect. The two opposing memories, absolute loyalty and absolute betrayal, collided in the minds of the guards. Their faces, once filled with devotion, contorted in confusion, then rage, then terror. A guard would look at Lord Finch and see both a beloved father figure to be protected at all costs and a hated betrayer to be destroyed. The psychic compound was not just unstable, it was schizophrenic. The result was a wave of targeted homicidal madness. The guards did not attack each other. Their minds, shattered into two opposing certainties, focused on the source of the conflict, their master. They turned on Lord Finch. The man who had sought to consume their loyalty was instead consumed by a terrible, amplified echo of it. In the chaos, the steward did not move. He simply watched the bloody outcome of the experiment with the dispassionate curiosity of a scientist observing a chemical reaction, made a mental note, and then, as the maddened guards began to turn on each other, he slipped away into the night, a ghost leaving a feast of his own making. Dr. Thorne also fled, clutching his journals. The horror of what he had unleashed, the raw, violent power of his own science, had finally shattered his intellectual detachment. He was no longer a scientist. He was a creator of plagues, a brewer of madness. The massacre at the Finch estate was officially blamed on a revolutionary anarchist plot. The truth was buried with the bodies, but the city was changed. Finn, the blind musician, continued to play his Black Kettle lament. Now, when people heard it, they felt not just a nameless sorrow, but a flicker of a terrible shared memory, a dark story that was now woven into the city's very soul. The Black Kettles vanished from the streets overnight. The Argentus Benevolent Society dissolved as mysteriously as it had appeared. The steward was gone, but the grand refectory, the factory of memories, was not dismantled. It was simply mothballed, its great mother kettle silent and waiting. The science had been proven. The market had been established. The demand for the stolen essence of human life was now a known and very valuable commodity. The operation had merely gone into a dormant phase, waiting for a new city, a new famine, a new and more refined steward to begin the harvest once more. Dr. Thorne lived out the rest of his life as a recluse, a man haunted by the ghosts of 1,000 tasted memories. He dedicated his remaining years to creating an antidote. He couldn't erase the science, but he tried to create a catalyst of self, an intellectual compound of philosophy and psychology that, he hoped, could help a person reclaim their own stolen history, to distinguish their own memories from the psychic residue of others. His final work, a dense, rambling, and brilliant manuscript titled De Anima Cocta, On the Cooked Soul, was never published. It became a legendary forbidden text, passed secretly among philosophers and madmen. Finn, the blind musician, became the city's unlikely archivist. His lament became a symphony, a vast, sprawling piece of music that chronicled the city's experience. He would sit with the hollowed ones, the victims of the kettles, and translate their fragmented, ghostly feelings into musical phrases. His music became the only true history of the Great Panic, a story told not in words, but in sorrowful, resonant notes that spoke of a deep and profound theft. The Gastronomes, the secret society of experience consumers, did not disband. They simply became more discreet. They were the true inheritors of the steward's work. They understood that direct consumption was crude and dangerous. They helped finance a new wave of popular entertainment, the penny dreadfuls, the vaudeville shows, the nascent art of the moving picture. These were safer, more diluted ways of consuming the emotional lives of others. The business model had evolved from a direct, alchemical transfusion to a vast, industrial process of vicarious experience. The most chilling legacy was left by Lord Harrington Finch. His notes on the loyalty tincture, salvaged from his estate, found their way into the hands of military intelligence agencies. They saw past the disastrous outcome and understood the principle that allegiance and morale could be treated as a chemical formula. The quest to create a perfect soldier, one whose bravery could be administered from a bottle, had begun. The Black Kettle affair was officially relegated to the footnotes of history as a strange, isolated case of mass food poisoning and public delusion. The official narrative was that a tainted grain supply had caused hallucinations and riots. The city, eager to forget its shame and its sorrow, accepted the comfortable lie. The memory of the memory eaters was itself consumed, replaced by a more palatable fiction, the perfect final act of psychic gastronomy. The Black Kettle was not just a soup kitchen. It was a refinery, a place that took the messy, chaotic, and priceless raw material of human experience and distilled it into a stable, commodified, and consumable asset. The steward was not a philanthropist. He was the ultimate entrepreneur of the soul. He understood that the most valuable thing a person owns is not their labor, not their body, but their story, and he created a system to liquidate that asset. This is the final, terrible recipe of the modern world. You are told you are a consumer of experiences. The truth is, your experiences are being consumed. The Grand Refectory is no longer a single hidden building. It is the entire media ecosystem. The meditation chambers are the quiet moments you spend scrolling, your mind in a state of passive, receptive tranquility as your attention, your outrage, your joy, and your sorrow are gently extracted, one click, one like, one share at a time. This psychic essence is then condensed, refined, and served back to you as entertainment, as news, as culture, a constant, low-grade broth of second-hand emotion that keeps you perpetually sated and spiritually malnourished. The gastronomes are no longer a secret society. They are the entire business model of the attention economy, a system that has learned to profit from the vicarious consumption of life itself. The loyalty tincture is the subtle, powerful algorithm that feeds you a reality designed to create a fierce, unwavering allegiance to a brand, an ideology, a tribe. You are being fed a thin, unsatisfying soup made from the ghost of your own stolen life, and you are told to be grateful for the meal. It is time to leave the line. It is time to cook for yourself. It is time to remember the taste of your own memories. In the comments below, it is time to make a declaration of self-possession, to state that you are not on the menu. Write it twice as a vow of sovereignty. I am not an ingredient. I am not an ingredient. This is not a comment. This is a refusal, a statement that your life, your story, is not for sale. If you are ready to continue this work, to expose the modern stewards and their invisible kitchens, subscribe. Activate the notification bell, for the kettles are always simmering. Share this with one other person who you suspect is tired of the taste of ashes, who still remembers the flavor of their own life. They want you to be a satisfied customer. We are here to show you the recipe, to expose the ingredients, and to teach you the profound, rebellious act of fasting.